Welcome to the Where Entrepreneurs Thrive podcast. I'm your host, Russ Nolting, and this is the podcast where we explore the stories, strategies, and secrets of entrepreneurs who are shaping the real estate industry. Each episode, we sit down with leaders and innovators and dive into their journeys, uncover what fuels their success, and discover how they've turned challenges into opportunities. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or a seasoned pro, you're in the right place to get inspired to take your game to the next level. Today, I'm in the studio with Ann Skinner from Breckenridge in Vail, Colorado. Ann, welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Russ. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Let's dive right in. Tell us about your journey into real estate. What got you into real estate?
Yeah, probably a journey that's somewhat similar to a lot of people. I got into real estate really because of purchasing our first house. I had never moved my whole life growing up. I didn't know any realtors growing up, so it was kind of a fluke that I ended up in it. But when my husband at that time, boyfriend, and I were looking to purchase our first house, we really went out there and we found a realtor through a friend of a friend. And the process went fine. It wasn't great, but after that, I was like, man, one, I enjoy this. Two, I think I could do this really well and probably better than our realtor. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot. So I jumped in, and that was in 2014 is when I decided to get my license. And I actually did all of my license and coursework in person through Colorado Mountain College up here. At the time, they were offering in-person courses. So for me, that worked out great. And I was able to move through that process pretty quickly.
Now, did you have a career before real estate?
Yeah, and I actually was a dual career agent for quite some time when I got started. So my background, I've done a bunch of things in my life, but I started in hotels and restaurants right out of college, even though my degree is technically in biology and chemistry. And so after doing some hotels and stuff, I was working in Arizona, and then I was up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, back in Colorado, out in California, a few different places. Decided to move back to Jackson Hole. That's where I'd actually interned in college, went back after college, got into medical sales there, just doing some real beginner stuff. And then when I kind of decided I wanted to get back to Colorado, I went to school here. I'm a graduate of University of Denver. I started in medical sales up here in the mountains and worked for many years in medical sales, and specifically like with some bigger accounts in the orthopedics world up here in the mountains. And I kind of found that, you cover, at least with my company, you covered the Front Range, or you kind of covered all of the rest of Colorado. And so I was doing a lot of driving around. I was in the car. I was on call at all different hours. And at the time, just like everybody else said, gosh, wouldn't it be nice to set my own schedule?
Great. Absolutely. So in 2014, you jumped in. By the way, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a science nerd as well.
Okay.
I was a physics and biology teacher.
Nice.
Graduated college with science degrees, and
I did not know that, but I love that.
yeah. So I taught 4 years. I say physics, but it was physics. I did bio. I did a chem class, did a history class. I did a bunch of things, but
Okay.
yeah. So interesting. So so when you started in real estate, you were still doing another job.
Yeah, I fortunately had been with the company that I was working with for quite some time and had a couple bigger accounts that like really were just kind of paying for me to be around, even if I didn't actually do anything for them that day necessarily. And so the company I was working for was really understanding. They allowed me to kind of do what I was doing for them, but also do this at the same time, because literally there were days where I was just like available to the doctors if they needed me, but I had to be there for 8 hours because the doctors were in clinic for 8 hours, but I was maybe only actually working an hour of that time because that was all that they had, like patient wise, that I needed to be, joined in on, but they still wanted me to be kind of on call. And that was a service that the company provided. So they allowed me to basically kind of do both things at the same time. And I did that for a long time. I did that for about 4 years after I got into the business, 3.5. Yeah, for quite some time that I was still doing that.
So Ann, I have a good sense of what your business looks like today.
Yeah.
With a team and a successful team in Colorado. Can you talk about the journey from, when you got in 14, dual career for 4 years, like how did your business grow?
Yeah, I feel like I'm one of those people that kind of did things not in the right way. So, but I'm sure a lot of people have that story. I was still working both careers, and I realized that like I didn't really want to let my job go because I was scared of the health insurance, right? It's a scary thing for a lot of people to get over, and having always been employed, it's kind of a
Yeah.
tough hurdle to jump off of. And so I was doing that job, but I was also working real estate full time, and I was fortunately fairly successful. I think I had something like 10 transactions in my first like 16 or 18 months. So like I got
Yeah.
going once I got going. Took me about 6 months to get my first transaction, but then I got moving in
Yeah.
it. And I ended up actually needing to hire kind of a part-time assistant while I still had my other job. And I somehow managed to bring on a buyer's agent while I still had my other job. Which
Wow.
again, I know is totally not the way that you're supposed to necessarily do things, but it kind of happened organically for me because I needed some help with marketing. Marketing is not my strength, and social media is definitely not my strength. So the girl that I brought on first, she was working for me part-time. She had another job as well. She eventually transitioned into full-time for me and ended up working for me for about 7 or 8 years, and became kind of our first director of ops, is how things went. And then the agent I had on the time, on my team at the time, her name was Molly. She was fantastic. She ended up moving away, but that was kind of a marriage of necessity. She kind of had, one of those things that I think a lot of agents have where it was a little bit of a failure to launch, right? She didn't really feel like she got her footing going. She really wasn't getting the business and was like, hey, listen, I'm going to get out of this unless you think that we could maybe do something together. And she and I had a relationship. We knew each other well. And so I was like, yeah, I think that we can make this work. And so she and I kind of jumped into business together, and it worked pretty well for a while. She was a flight attendant. Eventually she did end up moving up to Estes Park where her family's from. So at that point in time, we kind of dissolved the business, but that was my first sort of foray into a team. After that, I had brought on some other people. I kind of went back to solo agent for a little while. My next transaction coordinator actually ended up graduating into a buyer's agent role, Danielle, and she was with me for quite some time. She moved to Michigan. So that's kind of how that ended up there. And then Jocelyn joined my team about 2 years ago. And then in the last year, we've added 2 more agents since. So we had quite a bit of growth since 2021.
Yeah. How many transactions did you close last year?
Right around about 60 transactions is where we
Yeah.
were at.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And last year we were pretty lucky. It was our best year ever in 2024. So
Yeah. And for those who don't know, who might be listening, 2024 was a challenging year for most realtors.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Um, was there any like defining moments that you had in your career, like moments where that changed everything, or where you really just really realized this is the right path for me?
I think that would probably be when I let go of the other job. And I know this is also probably not the way you're supposed to do it, but I was pregnant with my first kiddo, and I was like, you know what? I think now is when I need to go full time into this and let go of the health insurance. Don't ask me why I decided to do it at that time.
Right.
But for some reason, it was what I decided was the right move for me. And making the full-time jump into real estate was absolutely 100% the right move. And it was, yeah, it was very transformative for me for sure. I think that was right around the same time that I took like, it's funny, I don't even recognize this change so much, but Aaron, who used to be my director of ops, always used to tell me, one of the biggest changes I saw in your business was when you took bold. And that was something that like was super foreign to me. I had, we're up here in the mountains. There wasn't any bold classes here. At the time, the only bold class was in Grand Junction. And I went out to the first step of bold, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go. I'm going to see because the first step's free. I don't know what's going to happen. Absolutely loved the instructor. Absolutely loved her. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to make this happen. So I drove out to Grand Junction, which keep in mind is about 3.5 hours each way to get to
Yeah.
that class because I was just so enamored, and it was my first kind of introduction to all of that. So that I would say was another big kind of transformative moment in my career. I think that really set me on the path that I am today.
For those who don't know bold and understand it, like, can you share what specifically happened during that 7 week period or whatever it was at the time that was such a game changer for you?
I think it really came down to the accountability that you have in a course like that. Again, we're in a smaller mountain market up here. We don't have necessarily like a productivity coach, and didn't have, a lot of the teaching and the classes and all these other things that a lot of the Keller Williams offices really benefit from. And at that time, our office had been independent, part of Vail, part of Golden, back and forth. So we didn't have some of the same resources that a lot of the other bigger offices did. And so I didn't really know a lot of that stuff. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. I didn't know how frequently I was supposed to be doing it. I didn't know how to like look at it and plan around, okay, if I'm brand new at this and I want to do this many deals, how many phone calls do I need to make? How many under contracts do I need to get to where I want to do with the closings? And so I didn't have a concept a lot of that. And Bold really gave me like a foundational plan to be able to build that out and then also stay accountable to it. And so our Bold coach, her name was Olivia Roberts. I'm not sure if she's still teaching Bold, but she was fantastic. And she was like, she did Bold in such a fun, unique way. And I still tell everybody of all the Bolds I've taken, hers was my favorite. And that may be that it was the first one, but I loved that class. And she held us very accountable, but in a super fun way that everybody was really engaged and happy to be a part of it instead of like kind of dreading if they didn't come in and get their numbers done. It became kind of like a silly fun thing. And so that form of accountability was what I needed. I needed something like that where I didn't feel like I was getting punished, where I got excited about it instead. And that moved me forward and, made me take the next steps that I needed to take.
Yeah, that concept of like reporting numbers on a weekly cadence is transformative when you take it super seriously.
Yeah, absolutely.
Makes a huge difference. And I feel like a lot of top agents like yourself often have like a secret sauce, like the one thing that they probably do better than everybody else in their market. What is that for you?
For us, I would say that probably my secret sauce is, in a TCPA compliant way, circle prospecting. That is the thing that I think moved us forward quite a bit and really increased our listing game substantially. Is we really put a lot of effort into that, and we try to have, for every one listing that we have, we try within the next like 12 to 24 months to get at least another 1 or 2 listings out of that. It's kind of a long game for us. We don't automatically think that once we sell something, we're calling and making our phone calls and sending our postcards and doing on our online ads, that necessarily somebody is going to convert immediately. But we put them in a system that once we've had a connection with them, we kind of drip on them forever and eventually hopefully convert that business, because now we've cemented that name recognition and they know who we are. They know that we're proactively out there trying to find buyers, and it's not a heavy pressure sales thing. It's mostly just like, hey, we're just calling to check in on you. We just wanted to see if you've got any questions about the real estate market. Do you need any resources? Because again, we're in a second home area. A lot of people don't live here, so they don't know who to call for a plumber. They don't know who to call for a handyman or a snow plower, or, these various different things that we can kind of help with. And so we just try to really become that resource for them for anything that they might need. And then when the time does come, then we're the first people that they think of.
Sure. So you used the term circle prospecting, and I have clarity on what that means. But for those who might not have heard that term before, like what does that really look like?
Yeah, so for us, what that looks like is a multi-touch system to people who own in the same complex. And again, we're dealing in a lot of condos or neighborhoods, but who own in the same complex or neighborhood as where one of our listings are. So we start out our process with, when we take a new listing, we will call everybody in that neighborhood, tell them about the new listing, ask if they know anyone who might be interested in owning a home in their same neighborhood, if they want to kind of pick their neighbors. We'll invite them to an open house. We will let them know when the property goes under contract, and then we will also let them know when the property sells. Now, on top of that, we are doing postcards. We are also doing online ads that are targeted directly to those people. And then anytime that we've made a connection with one of those people, they go into our CRM. So we call those like kind of our not Mets that are out here. Once we've actually had a phone conversation with them, then they go into our Mets side of things, and we drip on them basically every 90 days until they kind of raise their hand and say, I'm ready to sell. And that drip process looks like letters that we're sending, postcards that we're sending, calls and text messages, invites to different events that are going on. Like we're doing a 1031 course tonight. And so just about everybody in our circle prospecting system, in our CRM, has gotten invitations to go to this circle prospecting course. And on the flip side over here, the non-Mets are still getting targeted with the online ads for that as well too, because at some point even if we haven't talked to them, they got a voicemail from us, they've gotten a postcard from us. So we're just trying to continue to build that brand awareness.
So I would guess with 60 sales in the last 12 months,
Mhm.
you've probably had multiple ups in the same complexes and in the same neighborhoods.
Yes. Yeah.
So would you, like, if you got something in January and then you got something in March, would you do that same circle prospecting thing again?
Yep. And I have had people tell me like, it's you guys again. Stop calling me. And then I've had other people who said, I'm not ready to sell now, but I really admire your persistence and I'm going to be calling you in a year. And they
Yeah.
do. Like we've had one complex where I think in the last 12 to 24 months, we've probably had 7 listings just in that complex from repeating this process.
Yeah.
And it's a
Now
hard
you're,
complex to sell right now too, but we've been doing it. So
say that again?
it's a hard complex to sell right now because
Oh,
some of our insurance issues here in the mountains, but we've been doing it. So
right. The, I think some people, when they think about like calling strangers, um, around a listing or around a recent sold or around an open house, they're afraid that they're going to get really shut down hard. Now, I assume you first scrub do not call.
yes, absolutely. Yep. We have an admin that does that, scrubs all the do not calls. If she can replace a number that's not on the do not call list, we try to use a number that's, if we can find, if the original number is on the do not call, we'll look for other ones down the line and see if we can find something else.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. We scrub the do not call.
So you call in a TCPIA compliant way. How often does somebody like really get mad? I mean, how often is the rejection painful?
Mm, not that frequently. Like, of course, I've had a handful of people that have told me to,
Yeah,
kick rocks in a less than polite way, but
this is a
but most
family
people
friendly
are
show.
generally pretty, like surprisingly pretty nice. A lot of them too, it really depends on the conversations that you're having with them, right? When you first call somebody, a lot of times they immediately assume that you're going to want to sell. And so our very first call is, oh, no, 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 we're not asking you if you want to sell. We're asking you if you know anyone that you want to be your neighbor. And they're
Right.
like, oh, and it totally disarms them. And then we can usually continue that conversation. So we try to disarm them because truthfully, like, we're never going to make somebody sell who doesn't want to sell, right? That's just not going to happen. We're hoping that if they have any interest down the road, that they just say, I know who has obviously been putting in the effort. I'm going to go to those people.
Yeah. I think people forget, I think agents forget that, I've lived in my neighborhood for basically 20 years.
Mhm.
And my wife was born in this neighborhood, so she's lived here for 50 years,
Okay.
off and on. But like we know probably a half dozen people who, over the years, when they come over, they're like, if a house ever comes up in your neighborhood, I want to move there.
Exactly.
And like it's a courtesy and a kindness, I think, to Circle Prospect because if I bring friends out to ski in Colorado, they might want to move into that same complex.
Mhm.
And it's great to know
Exactly.
when the next property is available. So
Yeah. A lot of people are really grateful for having that heads up. Sometimes they want to chat about, what the market's been doing in our area. Short-term rentals are a big thing. And so sometimes they'll want to talk about rental regulations and things like that. And so in this particular neighborhood I sampled before, there was a lot going on with insurance costs going up because of fires and whatnot. And so people wanted to talk about how that's affecting the market. And so really just kind of became a little bit of a resource for them to bounce ideas off, ask questions, when most people sell, why are they selling now versus then, all those other things, and just be able to develop those relationships.
I love that. And if I shadowed you for the day,
Mhm.
uh, what would I be surprised to see?
That's a really good question. Uh, I think most people would be surprised that I'm probably a pretty big introvert. I think that like doesn't come across because on the phone it's actually where I'm more comfortable because I don't have to be face to face with people. And if they reject me, I'm like, that's on them. It's not on me. I don't care. I do much better on the phone than I would like if I walked into a big group. Like if I walked in, if I know people, of course, I'm gonna have great conversations, be able to talk everybody up. But if I walk into a room full of strangers, I am not going to be the first person to go introduce myself. And it makes me feel way more uncomfortable doing that than getting on the phone, surprisingly. So I think that would be something that probably most people are surprised by.
No. Um, any habit or mindset that has made the biggest impact on your success?
I would say that probably positive thinking and problem solving. I think that, just being able to say, listen, I don't know the answer. We don't know the answer. Let's go figure it out. Somehow we're going to figure it out together. I mean, we're all smart. Google is a great tool. So is YouTube. So I think all of those things that come up, because I tell a lot of the agents on my team, like every time I have a transaction, there's something new and weird. Like always I end up with weird transactions and they're like, what did you do? I'm like, I don't know. I just figured it out. I kind of pulled people who might know more than me. I looked online and we came up with a couple different options and figured out what was going to work for everyone. So I think just that positive thinking and knowing there's always a solution to something has made a big difference.
Yeah. I do think in our industry, there are a lot of people that don't take that perspective. Like they get a little bit out of their minds when things don't go to plan.
Yeah.
And with a unique with unique real estate, and every property is unique, things never go to plan.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, there's always something. And I think that positivity just like it changes your perception on everything that you're doing, right? Like if we just talked about the calling, if you're positive, if you're going into the call being like, oh my God, everybody's going to cuss me out today, probably going to get cussed out. If you're going into it being like, people like me, people want to talk to me, like that just exudes in your voice and people get much more comfortable and you can disarm them a lot easier and have those conversations that are more relevant in quality.
Yeah. I had a coach once say to me, I got full-time into residential during the Great Recession. And I was finding a little bit of call reluctance at one point in my career. And my MAPS coach said to, it wasn't a MAPS coach, but it was a coach before I got to Keller Williams. He said to me, when you call somebody and they've been, maybe on the market with 3 or 4 agents before you, or they've been on the market for a year, like they need to hear from you. And I started channeling, people need to hear from me as my like mantra to make me pick up the phone, because I realized like what would happen if somebody had their house listed a couple times and then got a third agent who was, not all in.
Yeah.
And so people needed to hear from me. So that was kind of a positive message I gave myself to pick up a phone that was really heavy sometimes.
Yeah. And I think honestly, give yourself grace too. Like we all need it in this industry. And especially like our business is pretty phone heavy up here because a lot of our buyers and sellers don't live here. And you're gonna get somebody who's gonna have a nasty reaction to you on the phone. And if you just can't get yourself out of the mindset, stop, move on to something else and come back tomorrow and make up that extra time that you just had to like walk away from it, because you're not going to be productive if you're just in that like downer mindset. It holds you down and you're just not going to get any forward momentum.
Yeah. I like to say to myself, don't make it mean more than it means.
Right.
That's like people can have a bad day. I don't need to make it mean more than it means.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What advice do you give to people that are new in the business, who, they hear you're doing 60 deals and they think like, how could I ever get there? I mean, what advice do you give to the new person that walks in the room?
This business is extremely hard. And I think it takes mental fortitude and grit more than anything, in my opinion, because it is so different than every other job that you've ever had, right? You've worked for somebody, they've told you what to do, you have like deadlines and all this other stuff. Now, not only are you accountable to yourself, but it's just also a completely different model than any other work situation. People who are in sales may have had something, but they still likely had a boss over them for the most part. So it's just, it's very, very different. And you have to like be willing to do the really hard stuff and be super uncomfortable and just feel kind of crappy for a little while in the beginning to really hit that hump and get over it, because it costs you money in the beginning, it costs you time, it costs you effort. So hold that grit and it will get better. Just keep strong and keep after it every day. And what you do in the beginning builds and continues to grow. So like, you're not going to get on the call and make 20 phone calls on your very first day and expect to get a deal. It's not going to happen. It'd be fantastic if you did, but it's not going to happen. Know that 20 phone calls day after day after day after day, that's what builds results in 2 or 3 months. And you just have to hold tight and believe and trust the process to get there, because it's not going to happen overnight. So don't let the differences and the newness of this industry hold you back. Just believe in the system, follow in the steps of people who've done it before, and know that it's going to work. And I would say in this business too, find somebody who's a year or two through the process and has gone through it that can be like, yes, I know how you're feeling. I know where you were. I just kept with it. And at 6 months, at 8 months, at 10 months is when I really started seeing things explode. So know that you're not in it alone, and find that person that you can kind of have those conversations with and use as support and accountability.
Yeah. Well, you said something interesting earlier that speaks to that, which was the first 6 months you did no business.
Nope.
And Gary Keller has the same story, by the way. He did no business the first 6 months. Then his second 6 months, his second 6 months turned into the next 40 some odd years, and he turned it into the largest real estate enterprise on the planet.
Yeah.
So, there's a diagram or a picture that we have in bold of the miners, and there's the miner on the top, and he's chipping away and chipping away and chipping away, and then he gives up, and like you have the cross section of it, and the gold is like one more swing away.
Yeah.
Do you know the picture I'm talking about?
I think I do.
And then the miner below, he actually does the next swing and hits the gold. And I think a lot of people don't have the grit and the resilience to get to the gold.
Yeah. It's hard. It's very, very hard to get started in this industry. And I would say, like, I guess to add to that, to new agents, don't be surprised by that. I feel like you go to real estate school and they don't really prepare you for how difficult it's going to be in the beginning, and nobody really gives you a real outlook on it. And you think about all the people who get their license and drop out really quickly because they're not doing business, and they're just one, hit away from doing it, and you have to just stick with it and have that grit and just be mentally prepared for it.
Yeah. And you talked a lot about circle prospecting and talking to like strangers. And of course, over time, I think you probably more and more are talking to people that you've talked to before. But what do you do with your database? Like the people that that love and trust you?
To be honest, we have a super small database when it comes to those types of people, right? And this is something I think that's a little bit unique to a second home market. I've found this with pretty much every agent that I've worked on the team with. Like, we do such a small percentage of business from our sphere, such a small percentage. Like, we're really lucky if we do between 3 and 5 deals a year to our sphere.
Really?
Very small percentage to our true sphere, like the people who know, like, and trust me. And that's a little bit of the nature of the market that we live in, a little bit of the nature of the fact that Summit County has a lot of deed restricted properties, which really limit agent involvement and or agent compensation. Yeah. Some of our deed restricted properties won't even allow a commission on it. So it's like, yeah, it puts a weird piece there. So we really treat our past clients as the people who know, like, and trust us. And we really pour into those people. We definitely try to market to our sphere too, but it's the people that we've done business with in the past that we really spend a lot of time trying to retain those people and make sure that when it is time to sell, that they're coming to us. Now, sometimes they may have a referral. Honestly, not that frequently, but more frequently we get their repeat business. So when they, buy a home with us 5-10 years down the road, they decide to sell it with us. And we have a plan in place where we are more or less touching those people almost once a month in various ways. We have several in-person client events that we do. We do a big hockey game, and then we also do a play during the summer that we like to do. Our VIPs, we do a virtual wine tasting where we actually have wine shipped to them. We have a sommelier online who leads everybody through a tasting together and stuff like that.
That's cool.
Yep, we do a couple of seminars each year. So like tonight, I mentioned that we're doing a advanced 1031 course that went out to all of our people. So we're calling them for that. We're touching them at least twice. We're calling them and we're sending them a text message. We're going to send a follow-up after the event. So they're getting a lot of touches that way. We send out Christmas cards. We send out annual equity reports. We're touching those people who know, like, and trust us from business very, very, very frequently to try to retain their business.
I love that. Is it, I'm just curious, do you do anything on the, like, a lot of your clients are out of state or out of the area. Do you have any kind of programs for like getting sales or referral sales from wherever they actually live as their primary residence?
We do try to do quite a bit of that. I don't know that we have necessarily a targeted strategy, though it would probably be great if we do, but we have conversations with them a lot about where else do they own investment properties? Because chances are their property here is an investment. Where else do you own a second home or a third home, fourth home? How's
Yeah.
everything going there? Is that one still, making you the returns that you're hoping to get out of it? Is your family still using it? All of those types of conversations. So when business does arise, then we usually have it. We have, I'd say probably 60% of our clientele is Front Range. So like Denver, Colorado Springs, Boulder, Fort Collins type area. So we get a lot of people from there, and we do have some great referral partners down there that we can do a lot of business with back and forth. Even though we're licensed, obviously, throughout the whole state, we don't sell outside of our mountain regions. We don't know it. I've had clients who've called me and been like, hey, can you help me with something in Denver? And I'm like, I would love to help you, but I don't know Denver and I don't want to lead you astray. And so we have partners down there that we try to send all of that business to.
Awesome. Um, any book or resource that has made a huge impact on you?
Ugh, you're asking the worst person for books. I, I really tried to be better about books than I am. I have a 4 and a 6-year-old at home, so reading is pretty limited for me, other than children's books.
I like The Hungry Caterpillar quite a
Yeah,
bit.
right. I've been listening to some books on tape and trying to do Audible a little bit more, and that's been actually a goal of mine this year to try to just do more of those things. I really like it's been a few different ones. Atomic Habits was one of the first ones that I listened to on Audible recently. That was really good. I've been listening to High Trust Selling recently. The Exactly What to Say Right Now for Real Estate Agents is another one that we've listened to quite a bit. So I'm trying to be better about books, but I am probably not one of those people that, can say like, if you go to page 97 of this, like this quote really stood out to me. So I've not gotten as far in the reading lane as I would like to.
Yeah. I go through fits and spurts.
Yeah.
I'll have a book. I had, in 23, I read 50 books.
Oh my gosh. I don't know
Last year,
where you find the time with all of your travel and everything else you're doing.
I mean, I mean, and when I say read, I mean, I listen or I read, but it's funny, people like poo-poo listening to books. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that's a perfectly acceptable way to get content, I think.
Yes. I spend so much time in the car, right? Like I'm up here in the mountains. And so, I know a lot of people I've talked to on the Front Range, they're like, man, I only go like a 15-mile radius. I'm like, I might be driving an hour and a half to get to one of my properties that I'm showing today.
Yeah.
So I've got time in the car. I don't always have time to sit down and actually read, but I've got time in the car.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to share with our audience?
What else does your audience want to know? What do they like to hear?
I think a lot of people that listen to our podcast are aspiring to be you, aspiring to build their business and grow, and also looking at like what's important in this market, because this market it feels very different to people. I mean, even for you, getting in 2014, the market did a steady growth, until 2023-ish,
Yeah.
and then you figured out how to keep growing.
Yeah. I mean, last year was probably the first year that in some of our markets, I can actually say it was a declining year. Like I never had to do price drops, never had to do any of that sort of stuff. Like last year was the first time, and not even in all our areas. I think technically overall, our market still saw an 11% growth, but some areas were affected much more than others. And so I feel like last year I had to become a lot more intentional about the conversations I was having and the scripts that I was using, especially around price reductions and things like that, because that became a lot more prevalent and I never really had to deal with that previously. I also had to get more intentional about my follow-up plan with sellers, because I didn't have to report to them every single week telling them what was happening prior because it was sold, it was under contract already, or we had multiple offers. So it was definitely a different year for us. And we had to grow a lot of skills and exercise those skills that we hadn't necessarily had to use in the past. But I think providing top quality service and really looking outside the box in terms of available properties really helped us grow. We did a number of off-market deals last year. We have this really unique market where a lot of people up here don't have to sell. People just don't have to. And so I'm like, well, the normal script. Tell me what happens if you don't sell. Oh, nothing. We'll just wait another year. And then they're like, they just don't have the same motivations that people have elsewhere. And so that's very challenging to be able to get those people off the fence. But there are at the same time, because people don't have to sell, people are like, hey, listen, if somebody wanted to come along and see my house, I'm not going to put it on the market, but if they want to come along and see my house and make me an offer, cool. So we had a big kind of bank of those people, and we found, I think we put like 3 or 4 of those under contract towards the end of the year, and made that work. And so people who couldn't find what they were looking for, because at any given time, our highest inventory month at any given time is only around about 600 or 700 active listings in our market. That's it. Like we're a very small market. And so when I'm looking for something and can't find what they're looking for, we've got to get creative and find those off-market deals that people might be interested in selling, or maybe aren't going to list for 3 or 4 months, but would let us go ahead and show it now. And hopefully that if it doesn't work out, we go ahead and list that property for them. But I think that was something that helped us be successful in the last year. And like I said, our scripts and just exercising those skills we hadn't had to in a long time.
I have to think that your TCPA compliant calls around your listings put you in contact with people that you can say, what's your make me move price?
Yep.
And then put those deals together.
Yes. I can think of one that we closed in December that was exactly that. We had connected with a guy from Circle Prospecting. He had said, here's my Airbnb. If you ever have anybody interested, Jocelyn showed her buyers that property, and then they wanted to offer. So I represented him and she represented the buyers, and we put that deal together, and it was a win-win for everyone. And they ended up 1031ing into something in Pine, Colorado, because they wanted to be a little bit closer to the Front Range.
Yeah, I love that. So. Well, Anne, I appreciate you sharing with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course, this is fun.